Hello and welcome to a special weekend edition of the Lancaster Farming Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock. I'm the digital editor here at Lancaster Farming newspaper. And if you listened to the show this past week, I mentioned at the end that I just have a lot of interviews to share with you lately. So rather than bundling them up and putting a bunch of different people on one show, or just not publishing these interviews as timely as I would like to, I'm just gonna, crank them out as best I can. So with that in mind, that's what we're doing today. I'm sharing with you my interview from this past week with Geoff Whaling. He is the chair of the National Hemp Association. This continues my theme of good news. Geoff has some good news to share with us. Before we get into it, I will say that the National Hemp Association is one of our sponsors of the show. They're not technically sponsoring this episode. This episode is made possible with generous support from IND Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana, Americhanvre Hemp, that's Cameron and Mel, their hempcrete business. Thank you for your support. And also, shout out to Forever Green, distributors of the KP4 hemp cutter. All right, so thank you for your generous support. And now we're going to get into my conversation with Geoff Whaling. Geoff Whaling, chair of the National Hemp Association. Welcome back to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How you been?
I've been very well, Eric, and thanks for having me again.
Yeah, absolutely. So here we are. It's 2024. I've been sort of following, the good news beat lately, and I'm hoping you have some good news to share with our audience.
Yeah, I think that despite the daily pains that we go through in trying to repeat ourselves and continuing our quest to educate people, we find that every single day there is something good that comes out of the work that we are doing, the industry, and obviously the good work that you have been doing on your podcast has helped us ease that pain. So thank you.
Yeah, well, we're all in it together, right?
Well, let's hope so.
So anyway, let's just talk about what the National Hemp Association has been up to lately. I've heard some rumors, some good news about maybe some USDA grants.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I think that the most important initiative for us in 23 and now into 2024 is the Industrial Hemp Act of 2023, which most people will know as the hemp exemption. Certainly, to remind people, there is both identical legislation in the House and in the Senate that is proposing to bifurcate industrial hemp, floral, and cannabinoid hemp from fiber and grain. Yep. And by doing so, looking at trying to change the permitting and reducing the barriers that farmers say are the most concerning for them. That legislation, we see those as marker bills because we're also working to have that language incorporated into the Farm Bill.
Okay.
And lucky for us, not lucky for farmers across this country, but lucky for us, Farm Bill did not meet its September 2023 deadline.
Right. Got a little extra time.
So we have a little extra time to continue to market. But I think that we are getting some really good momentum behind that ask. Obviously, with G.T. Thompson being the chair of the House Ag Committee, and as you know, Eric, he's from our home state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
He's been supportive of us all the way along. We know we have his support, but we need to get other members of the Ag Committee on board, and I think we're there.
Okay.
I feel very good about that. So that's a little bit of good news.
Well, GT's in the House. How's it going in the Senate?
Well, the other thing that people should know is that the Farm Bill switches its the responsibility for adopting or leading the Farm Bill every 5 years. Okay. Last year, the last time around, 2018, the Senate Ag Committee led it. This go around, the House Ag Committee does, and of course that's the GT. So, the process is that the House, when we last met with GT, we were fortunate to be in a meeting with Secretary Redding. Pennsylvania has certainly made the Industrial Hemp Act of 2023 one of their top priorities for the 2023 Farm Bill. So we used an event as an occasion to have a side discussion with GT. And he basically kind of laid out the framework. And I know that the framework is still holding fast, but he will be able to take the Farm Bill, and it's a huge document. He'll be able to release it in its final form to his members, to do a markup, and then they hope that they will be able to get into the House to pass the Farm Bill very quickly. And then that will go over to the Senate. They then will make their inclusions, and then they will send it back to committee so that they can agree on what they can all agree on and get it passed. So I think that everyone knows that the Farm Bill was extended through to September of 2024. I know it sounds all very complicated, but that's what I do every day.
Right.
And so we have that window of being able to work on additional items. So I'm pretty confident that we may not see exactly what we want, which was creating a sub-definition inside the Farm Bill for industrial fiber and grain hemp.
You don't think that's going to happen?
Oh, no, I think that's going to happen. What I'm not sure is whether or not our ask for a new sub-definition will be for industrial hemp fiber and grain, or whether or not they will take our definition and make it the definition of hemp and move cannabinoid and floral hemp to a sub-definition.
Oh, look at that. That's really interesting. I like that.
Yeah, so, and that's what we're hearing out of Congress, and so I don't know that answer, and none of us will know for sure until that Farm Bill language is released.
Right. From what I gather from talking to people, in the industry, there's like an educational challenge when you're dealing with people in government. It's like maybe they thought they did hemp already and they're confused why they need to do hemp again. Do you find that to be the case?
Or they're saying, oh yes, we have a policy on hemp, it's illegal. And that's because they don't know the difference between hemp and marijuana.
Right.
It is our second ask of the Farm Bill, which is to establish a whole of government approach to this commodity. It is what we and the team at the National Hemp Association does every single day, is that as we are working to support our members, Cameron McIntosh at Americhanvre is a good example. There was an opportunity. Every federal agency has something called an ARBIC program, which is a rural business improvement program, where they can offer funding. When there was an opportunity for DOD to offer call for proposals, we had to make sure that DOD would accept proposals from someone in the hemp industry.
Right, and that's the Department of Defense, just so people know what DOD is. And
DOD had a policy that internally there is divisions inside DOD, their drug policy group, that says that hemp is illegal. And that it is as a result of that policy that military cannot consume hemp products, although everyone else in this country can. But secondly, because of that policy, it kind of has spilled over into other divisions and departments in DOD who think, oh, well, this is illegal because of this.
Okay.
We need to fix those. And that's just one example of something we do every single day. We now have a firm understanding that the federal government and governments across this country are not going to have specific hemp initiatives. They're not going to create funds specifically for hemp. So we need to figure out how hemp fits into existing programs. And there are literally hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of programs that if we really dig deep into them, we will be able to support the things that we need to advance our industry. But we need that whole of government approach. We call it a WOG, or an interagency working group, because we need to make sure that every federal agency understands that hemp is legal, that they can offer programs, they should have policies, and they should be initiating programs within their area of responsibility that hemp might fit into.
Okay.
As you might know, I've been to the White House a couple times in January, advancing that issue. And interestingly enough, although we've identified 11 or 12 departments already that we have tried to, or we've already made fixes to, they asked us to continue to inform them of these as they contemplate what they can and cannot do to our request.
Okay.
And we thought, Erica and I thought, that the best way to approach this is have the Congressional Research Service, which is what Congress goes to research, and they produce some wonderful reports on industrial hemp. They just produced one about 3 weeks ago on the history of hemp in America. But we asked members of Congress who have been supporters to ask Congressional Research Services to produce a report outlining how every federal agency and department has implemented the 2018 Farm Bill, specifically the Hemp Farming Act of 2018, what policies they put in place, what programs that they put in place, what awards that they have offered, and to break it down both on floral cannabinoid initiatives as well as fiber and grain. And we did ask them to break it down because we thought when the congressional offices in each of these agencies and departments get this request, they'd say, wait a minute, there's a difference? What do you mean? What's cannabinoid floral versus fiber and grain? Because we know that they just don't know. Well, ironically, the first passover from Congressional Research Services was, yeah, we're not sure that we can achieve this goal because there is such a disparaging and far-reaching mismatch of policies and programs throughout the federal bureaucracy that they don't even know where to begin. So that one short paragraph we received as a response justifies our ask for a whole of government approach more than anything. Because as you and I've discussed, Eric, it is one thing for all of us to work together to include hemp in the 2018 Farm Bill, declare it a commodity, and now it's legal across this country. It's another thing to make governments understand that they are in part responsible for the prohibition of hemp for 85 years and the baggage that we all now carry. And they need to do more than just create policies. They really need to step it up, and they need to either issue executive orders, or they need to really make an investment so that if we're going to achieve all the potential that hemp has to offer, not only here in the United States, but around the world, that we need governments who have prohibited this crop to step up.
There you go. There you go. I read in the news recently that Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell has announced that he's going to be retiring, I guess, in the fall. And he's been, back in the days of the 2018 Farm Bill, he was like the hemp champion. But I hear that he sort of got burnt out from maybe CBD hemp. But I don't know. Can you talk about sort of his legacy or like his importance in this developing hemp industry at this point?
Well, foundational, quite frankly. I remember first working with he and his office and some of his constituents who were notified that they would be losing their tobacco subsidies. And they, as a group in Kentucky, kind of got together and looked at what their grandparents had grown or generations earlier had grown. And it was this crop called hemp. And as anyone who's a historian knows, hemp was a very big commodity in Kentucky. So I joined the forces with them, and certainly Mitch McConnell was wanting to help his constituents and his farm community. And so he started the process of figuring out a way that hemp could be introduced in the 2014 Farm Bill. I remind people that was the beginning of the Legitimacy of Industrial Hemp Research Act, passed in 2014. And listen, I admit to being naive. I continue to admit that I don't know all things about the legislative process, but that allowed states to reintroduce hemp under their own definition of research without any federal oversight. And so that's really how we started to create some of the problems. Mitch McConnell reminded me that there's no perfect legislation and that we would have another go around. And of course, that next go around was the 2018 Farm Bill. And we know the debacle that was created because, in fairness to our industry, states decided that the definition of research, as it was in Pennsylvania, was on a university plot that was, no larger than 2 acres, where Kentucky and others wanted to seize this opportunity. And they not only looked at a full commercialization, because let's research the commercialization of hemp CBD, and we got into the problems that we did. And, it was challenging. And yes, it was used against Mitch McConnell in his reelection campaign, that his opponent ran ads that showed him cutting ribbons and being arm in arm with people in the CBD industry. And so, he got fatigued to the point where I learned recently that the Farm Credit Organization reached out to me because they had attended Mitch McConnell's Farm Bill 2014 Farm Bill Outreach Initiative. And all he talked about was industrial hemp, where in 2018, he did continue to talk about industrial hemp. And this year, he brought Senator Boisman, and hemp wasn't even discussed. So Farm Credit and others were still unsure whether or not, hemp was as legal as it used to be, whether or not they could still fund programs. And it's concerning. But good news to go along with your theme.
Yeah.
I met with McConnell's staff in January, and pleased that they had said to me that he is going to be advancing his own industrial hemp legislation. They are supportive of the initiatives that we have moved forward, maybe not as much on the in-field testing, but they are going to be moving this along. So I don't think that despite him stepping down as the minority leader, he's going anywhere. He's going to, be here for the next couple of years, retiring after his term. 2026, I think he's out. So he's going to be around. Expect him to be as supportive. And listen, it is both Schumer and McConnell that helped us pass this in 2018. I think it's one of the only things they agreed upon in the Farm Bill.
Right. So you mentioned the testing issue in Kentucky, and they're not ready to just be like, visual testing is fine. They're concerned about THC in hemp.
Yeah, and I think that it's very important to listen in these discussions. Before I kind of push back and say, well, it's not necessary, and someone, what farmer in the right mind would jeopardize the family farm by growing something illegal? But what I soon came to realize is that Kentucky is not unique in this case, but they have a very vibrant illegal marijuana grow industry in the state.
They have a rich history of that as well, right?
Very rich history.
Yeah.
And you have to take it into account when you're listening to staff and to elected representatives that they are trying to deal with local issues. And in this particular case, affording the opportunity to grow hemp without background checks, without fingerprinting care, opens the door in their minds to someone growing marijuana illegally, despite the fact that most people would say that would be the worst thing that they could do.
Right.
But I think we need to do this. And again, I go back to what I talked about earlier with Mitch McConnell. He reminded me that there was no perfect legislation. This is a slow process.
Right.
And let's kind of get what we can this time. That's the good news. And then let's work on, the next go around.
Right. So it's the cornbread mafia. That's the group that was, I guess in the 70s and 80s that sort of still is creating issues for the government there in Kentucky. I think that it's like the spectrometer technology that's out there now. Like there's a company called Orange Photonics. It's like a handheld, you can get results in the field in like 18 minutes. And it's like DEA agents use this around the world. And I feel like that's a good opportunity for Kentucky to look into that, maybe.
Yeah, I've been approached by many. I mean, I've had a group that have said that they would like to genetically change hemp so that it grows blue. So, and I've heard this on more than one occasion for a long time.
Huh.
And I'm like, well, why would someone want to do that? So police can tell the difference between hemp and marijuana. And I said, yeah, that sounds more like a Monsanto to me. And
the thin blue line has a new meaning now. Yeah,
exactly. So, but I think that, again, research is going to help us advance this industry.
Tremendously.
Yeah.
Have you ever gone golfing with Mitch McConnell?
I have not, because as some people know, I am not a golfer, but I don't mind buying a golf course and turning it back into a farm.
Okay, so let's talk about what else. Where else should we go here, Geoff?
Well, I think one of the things that we're certainly doing is working with USDA. You touched on it a little bit. I didn't expand on it, but NHA has been awarded, and I think now that the president has signed the most recent appropriations package into law, we can talk about it. We've been awarded a USDA grant to help look at expanding and building the market. And we're going to be focusing on the African market in 3 regions and looking at ways that we can identify the barriers for us to open the door to ship American grown hemp grain, hemp cold pressed oil, and feed to Africa.
Right.
Grain for feed to Africa.
That's awesome.
So that's going to start. The other really good news is that the National Hemp Association has been welcomed on a provisional basis. It's kind of a long process, but it's a 2-year process to be included in the as a UN NGO. Which will allow us to help showcase American grown hemp as well as the hemp industry at UN events. We will be participating at what is called COP15, which is the biodiversity conference that is in Cali, Colombia this year. And we'll be going to COP29 as well. And we expect that this year we'll be participating with within the U.S. pavilion, and then once they approve us officially at COP29 as an authorized, respected NGO, then we'll be able to do independent events on our own in future years. So
that's awesome.
I think we'll be able to also open those markets and introduce to the world the potential of industrial hemp.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and that sort of shines a light on why building the U.S. hemp industry has such great implications, right? Because it's not like as we build it here, just, the nature of America at this point, it's going to have global, ripples, and that's fantastic.
Well, and if I can go back to the discussion about the Congressional Research Office or Service, Renee Johnson there, she produced a report, or I think she worked with the Law Library of Congress to produce a report because we were very interested, and congressional members were interested in who were the top 10 players in the industrial hemp space, what were their regulations, and what were their standards for products so that we could really look at advancing standards around the world.
Do you mean historically, like back before Prohibition, or
no,
just recently? In general?
Yeah,
okay.
Just who are the top 10 producers today? And the great thing about that report, when it was presented to us, we were asked to look at the appendix, and we were said, you should consider this a win. A little more good news that as a result of the passage of the 2018 Farm Bill, that 62 countries around the world are moving towards introducing legislation or regulation specifically to reintroduce hemp to their landscape. And so you're right, Erica, we need to really cement the expertise that we have in the United States. We need to grow the industry so that we can transfer that know-how to these countries rather than what I fear is that these countries are now going to start advancing a hemp industry regionally, and they're going to be doing so with monies that will come from the U.S. taxpayer through programs like USAID and others, whose job it is to help, feed the world. This is the opportunity. 2024 is the time to do it. We continue to juggle those things all day long.
Right. I feel like internationally, the other countries are going to be doing this with or without the U.S., right? So we need to be involved.
Well, and that is the reason that USDA has awarded NHA this, because we're uniquely qualified. We certainly understand the industry here, and that we can bring that information to these countries to find out what they're doing, what the barriers are for Americans to sell into this place, because we know that the world needs all the help it can if we're going to feed those people, and we know that the soils are going to be depleting, that we need to be able to produce crops that provide more food, more nutrition. And those of us that are in this industry intimately know that the benefits we can provide fit nicely within climate change, fit perfectly within biodiversity, and certainly can be part of the solution to feeding the world.
All right. Well, Geoff Whaling, it is so great to talk to you again. Thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure.
All right, there you go. Geoff Whaling from the National Hemp Association with good news for us here in the middle of March 2024. So that does it for me today. Thank you for listening to this special weekend edition of the Lancaster Farming Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock. I'm the senior digital editor at Lancaster Farming newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Check us out online at lancasterfarming.com. All right, and I've got a great show for you in store for this coming week. We're going to be talking to a paper manufacturer about hemp paper. So super excited to share that show with you. Let's see. So anyway, I'm going to leave you today with the sounds of spring peepers. This episode is copyright 2024 by Lancaster Farming newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written, recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Herlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Timber Channel.